Welcome back to the panel discussion, Mobile Device Management, Securing Your Agency's Information, sponsored by Accelera Solutions and NetApp on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Once again, our guests today are Mark Googe, Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Health Agency, Gary Barlett, Chief Information Officer of the Postal Service's IG Office, Joe Brown, President of Accelera Solutions, and Ken Liska, a Virtualization Solutions Specialist for U.S. Public Sector NetApp. Now, before break, we got talking about a interesting concept when it comes to virtualization, and I'm going to turn it back to Ken, and because you were about to talk a little bit about how agencies maybe are moving away from that vertical stack and move toward the horizontal stack, so the value proposition from virtualization is more real. So let's talk about that.
So going back to something that Joe said earlier about virtualization, or trying to get all of your servers virtualized onto get them off bare metal machines and onto the stack. That's the first phase that most companies do. They start moving applications, as I said earlier, then they start moving their mission critical stuff. After things have been virtualized and everything's been up and running for a while, the next step is agencies want to take more advantage of those virtual resources to, instead of having every special agency and organization or project get its own set of servers, you start sharing the resources among different projects. Maybe you've got certain things that happen at certain times of the year. If you're the IRS, for example, I'm sure that you've got a lot more tax preparation and auditing resources during this time of the year as opposed to 6 months from now. So you can rebalance your resources out like that. So that's what I spend most of my time working with agencies doing, is finding out how they can take their virtualization to the next layer and get more out of it. The other big benefit of the horizontal elasticity is disaster recovery. You can what many agencies will do is, instead of maintaining a cold recovery site for virtualized servers, they'll actually utilize resources that are meant for recovery for one application to do another workload. So instead of having everything has to have its own backup, because you're assuming everything's not going to fail at once, you'll have a certain amount of resources for backup and just plan on only certain things failing at any given time. Hopefully it's not a big catastrophic everything fails.
And the theory behind that is you may have to turn something up for a specific application, a specific time of the year, but most of the time you'll turn it back down and not use those resources, so then they're available for that disaster recovery should something happen. Do I get that right?
Yes, yeah. Another common one is backups. Many agencies don't actually dedicate servers to backups anymore. What they'll do is they'll turn backup servers in a virtualized environment on during the backup times and use resources only when they need them. And then later they'll turn them off during the business hours and use those resources for some other business-related workload.
All right, so we've talked virtualization. Let's move to mobility, because that's the other half of this conversation. How does virtualization really set the path toward mobility? Let me start with Gary, since, again, I use you guys as my example in the beginning. You guys were already looking down the path of bring your own device, mobility. You have auditors and investigators that are probably never in the office. So talk about virtualization, how it's leading you down that path toward better mobility.
Sure, absolutely. So, on a couple fronts. Number one, once you start presenting the users with an environment where it doesn't matter where they are, what device they're coming from, they can get access to the information, the tools they need to do their job. Right? Once they make that transition, they stop thinking about, is it a company laptop? Is it a company phone? Is it my phone? Is it my home workstation? So once you really get that culture change adjusted, and virtualization allows you to do that. So as we're moving into this virtual desktop, as I've been out talking to the users about this, I keep giving them the scenario of, imagine this: you're working on a spreadsheet. You go home, your boss calls you and says, "Hey, I really need you to make this change," and you're like, "Yeah, I didn't bring my laptop home. I just really didn't want to carry it. I really didn't think anything was going on." I said, but imagine if you can sit down at your home machine, or you've gone on vacation and you're at your mother's house, and you sit down at her machine, you log in, there's your desktop, there's a spreadsheet just like you left it, you make the change, your boss is happy, you're happy, everybody's happy. You start creating those mindsets, within your customer base, and they start demanding it. So now I'm in a position where I've been trying to push getting into a BYOD environment. I'm a little behind schedule, just based on some of the challenges that come along with doing a BYOD environment. And I've got users banging on my door saying, "Gary, when are we going to get this?" So they're starting to make that transition, that culture, and they're just envisioning, "Hey, I'm a guy or a worker that is on the road all the time. I never really know where I'm going to be, what device I'm going to have in my hand, and if you can give me access to the information I need to do my job, I'm a happy person."
So they're banging on your door. You better hurry up and get that
done. Absolutely.
It sounds like they want it. One of the things that you talk about is the move when you talk about mobility, is the access anywhere, anytime. Let me turn to Joe for a second and talk about, does virtualization, is that the key, or is cloud the key? And virtualization, as we've talked about, is that first step toward cloud.
Well, Jason, I think what's driving a lot of this, by the way, is that we all work not 40 hours a week anymore. We all work like 80 hours a week, right? And so the only way we can actually get all of our work done is if we do something we like to refer to as life slicing, right? Getting into a work situation and out of a work situation back into our personal life very quickly and seamlessly. And by having mobility as an offering from your agency organization, you can allow a user to work for 5 minutes, get something done, and be back in their personal life immediately after that. And then if they need to, an hour later, jump back into a work scenario to take on a new task that has to be accomplished for that day. Virtualization is, in my opinion, the foundation for mobility. It allows us to get to a mobile scenario for an organization much more rapidly than if we had to wait to redevelop all of our applications or wait for HTML5 to be fully baked and available for all applications. It's an immediate move from the old way of computing into the way we all really want to compute, which is like consumerized electronics allow us to do today.
Do you find that agencies see that as that roadmap, or are they trying to skip something and go to mobility without understanding that by virtualizing it, by adding, and let's say in Gary's case, the VDI piece, so you have security built in, that do they get those, that there's a series of steps that maybe they should take, that best practices dictate that you take?
There's a series of steps.
There was hesitation there. I just want to point that out.
Well, I can say that we've been very fortunate to be a partner with DHA, with Mark and his team for many, many years, and we've gone through an evolutionary process with DHA, rolling out their electronic health records applications enterprise-wide with a virtualization platform. When we approached DHA years back, and started this process, one of the big benefits we talked about with them was the ability to be able to use mobile devices to access electronic health records. And Mark and his organization are not unlike others in the sense that is not always as easy as it seems. These endpoint devices still, kind of offer up some challenges as it relates to security in some cases. And so there is a bit of an organizational transformation that any organization has to go through to get from simply virtualized applications to a full mobility solution. And many organizations get hung up, I think, along the way on the security aspects of it. And so we are working very closely with many of our customers and partners to help them think through the security piece of it. It is a difficult leap in many cases, and there are archaic rules in place that, quite frankly, are not warranted these days. But we have to help them sort of break those barriers.
All right, definitely want to touch upon the security. Before I do that, let me turn to Mark back at the Defense Health Agency. As you guys were going through virtualization and looking at mobile apps and bringing it together, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced, as Joe was mentioning, that you guys had to work through to kind of make some of this more of a reality?
Yeah, I think it's the translation of policy to the tactical and practical applied IT-ness, right? I mean, that was, as Joe said, that was a large challenge, especially given the years that we were doing this, right? I mean, it was a very moving target for us. So we just limited it to, right, the conditions that we set forth that says, well, as a accepted risk, this is what we're going to do within this things. We started at the facilities with our wireless, with our back-end, front-end, to allow those providers to utilize those applications in a way that untethered them from the desktop so they could roam around, like on the wards, treatments and stuff like that. You're rolling through, right, in grand rounds, 15 people, looking at all your patients to set conditions, to figure out what you need to do. And you need that constant data feed, not only with the customer or the patient in front of you, but really to those people that you're trying to teach and instruct about healthcare to health so they can get better. But, I think you've seen the past through at least from our side, a lot of the doctors would carry a big physician's desk reference, right? And drugs and this and that. Now by mobilizing them, I can consume that data in real time or near real time from those authoritative sources to say, what is the next drug-drug interaction? Oh, good, I probably shouldn't do this and that. But it really, I think the social engineering has happened on the outside. It's the social re-engineering we have to do in the inside to take advantage of what the business needs to those use cases, so we have the flows right and can put the right IT into the right hands at the right time.
So it sounds like you guys started locally, and then now are you expanding more broadly? So it's not just a LAN, but go into the WAN?
Well, we went enterprise-wide. When we
Okay.
did it, we just went out the whole enterprise. So it was kind of a fixed variable template that we did. And we rolled out this configuration across the globe to service all the customers, but we did it from a baseline that was architecturally compliant, that we could do a lot of change management controls very easily and provision that out to when we talk about that single pane of glass. I'm pushing updates globally, right? So that was a lot more when we talk about return on investments. Really, I didn't need a plethora of people now making the changes independently and have to cross-coordinate. I had that single pane, but the good thing is I had a rollback automatically in case something didn't go right? It used to take us days if you had to do it in a traditional server environment, days to get this thing back and make sure all the checksums are good and everything else on your provisioning of that, and then the downtime for the customers and the frustration. So I think when we talk about that horizontal elasticity, that is part of it, right? Where's it come from? I don't know, but I'm getting the data I need to make decisions. Great. Then we're doing our jobs as IT specialists, right, and providing the right information at the right time.
Let me ask Gary on this as well. When you guys are starting to look at the BYOD, as you said, people are banging down your door. Do you have the same set of standards, the same architecture basis to say, okay, here's the minimum set of requirements or the minimum standards we're using, and then you can work up from that?
Absolutely. So yeah, we've established what the minimum is going to be. What types of devices are we willing to support based on the solutions that we deploy. And then one of the things that's been interesting is trying to really map out and come to a clear understanding between us as the IT folks and our customers on what are the do's and don'ts. What can they do, what can they not do, and also what will we do and what not. What won't we do? And one of the big fears in a BYOD environment is, oh, you're going to be looking at all my personal stuff, and you're going to be watching me while I'm on Facebook. And trying to really articulate that no, that's not the case. So we're actually in the process of putting out a user agreement that says, look, we're both gonna sign a piece of paper that says, here's what you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, and here's what I will and won't do. So that if either one of us violates this agreement, there's been a breach of trust, but we're gonna establish that up front to help with that adoption.
I know a lot of agencies are sandboxing the federal data, the government data away from the personal data, and even to the fact that if you have to wipe your phone, if you lose the phone, you can just wipe the government data and not have to worry about the pictures of your kids or the ski trip you took or whatever. Let me turn to Ken real quick. Let's go down the path of security for a little bit. From a security for virtualization into mobility, is virtualization adding to that layer of security? Does it make things easier? Does it make it better? I mean, I've heard a lot about the VDI concept and how wonderful it is. From your perspective, what's the intersection between the two?
Well, the answer to that's going to be yes or no, depending on who you ask and what their role is. If you're the security administrator of the organization, it becomes a lot more complicated because they tend not to understand virtualization technologies or the difference between a virtual desktop and a physical desktop. For example, in the DoD, and I'm sure the civilian side adds this as well, there is certain guidelines, minimum security guidelines that affect desktops and how they're deployed, which are great if you have a physical desktop sitting on a desk that an intruder can come up, walk up to, and manipulate directly. Some of those guidelines don't directly apply to a virtual desktop where it's already secured at a data center. It's running off a secured image that is thrown out every time someone logs off and a brand new one's generated. So some of the policies that are meant to protect that virtual desktop or that physical desktop just end up putting more of a load on the virtual desktop, making the solution to support it more expensive and more cumbersome for the security administrators. Now, back to the original question, virtualization as a tool in your toolbox of things you can do makes securing your mobile data a lot easier. You can do things like NetApp, Citrix, and VMware all have products that are sort of like secure versions of Dropbox, where an agency can have files that they want their employees to use and stored on their mobile devices, but they get stored in a secure container that's not on a public server somewhere. It's on a server that's hosted by the agency itself. It's stored in a cache they know is secured and can be that can be deleted, poison pilled if the device gets stolen or whatnot. So there's the virtualization are some of the tools that get you to that step. So the end result is yes, it makes security easier, but the process of going from non-virtualized to virtualized is more difficult.
So almost going back to what Mark said, but sometimes the policies don't catch up with the tactical. I want to just touch upon the secure cache issue again. So when you talk about a Dropbox type of environment, does it then get automatically backed up? So for instance, if one of Gary's investigators is out investigating something and inputs a bunch of data, and he's or she is some place where maybe they're not quite logged onto the network, but they're going through the VDI, that data would then be in this Dropbox until they hit a button to upload it back to the server? Or is it kind of a type of thing where the server's uploaded every 24 hours from that Dropbox type of capability?
Each solution's a little bit different, but they all act very similar. So I'll just describe NetApp Connect, which is an app-specific one. What our solution will do is it'll go on your iPhone or your iPad or whatnot. You'll be in the field. Your agency will have your data, your files you need to access, will be stored in the normal location on your network. So it's on your network wherever it belongs. It's not in a public server anywhere. Their device then has access to get to that data securely through its own little, not quite a VPN. It's basically an SSL VPN into that data. Only the data you allow them to get to. Once it's on the device, it can be set to just view it, so you can't save it to the device. You can only see it, or it can be set so you can save it in a secure cache where it's encrypted. So if someone steals your device, you can either delete the cache remotely, or they won't be able to get into it without the password. So it's a way of, if they're offline, you can put data on the device and trust that it's not there. You can display data without actually worrying about leaving it on the device. Or if they're online, you can just always display the data and never even put it on the device.
All right, that's a great explanation, because I think the security of data and the security of the device, while two separate things and closely related, is the biggest stepping or obstacle for a lot of people. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into a little more about security. You're listening to the panel discussion, Mobile Device Management, Securing Your Agency's Information, sponsored by Accelera Solutions and NetApp on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Our guests today, Mark Gouge, Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Health Agency, Gary Barlett, Chief Information Officer of the Postal Service's Inspector General Office, Joe Brown, President of Accelera Solutions, and Ken Liska, the Virtualization Solutions Specialist for U.S. Public Sector at NetApp.